Good morning, everybody. If you're just tuning in, we're going to give people about 3 minutes or so to join us. Gina, are your kids still asleep?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said, are your children still asleep?
They are.
Good.
So I'm really hoping that one of them doesn't just wake up and come running down here and pops in. So, and the dogs are locked up, so hopefully no interruptions.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times it's happened when I've had meetings and then my kid starts to waltz in the back,
Yeah.
or gives me a hug or a kiss, which is awesome. I've really enjoyed it's like a lot of bad things are happening, obviously, but I've really enjoyed the my ability to spend 24/7 with my kid.
Yeah, I haven't had much opportunity to work from home, but when I have, it seems every time I have a meeting, someone chooses to knock on the door and my dog barks and interrupts the meeting. But
yeah.
That's commonplace these days, I think.
Yeah, I'm just hoping my French bulldog doesn't start howling. It sounds like a child being tortured. So hopefully he behaves.
All right, I think we are going to start. Give me like 2 seconds. I think we're going to start. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Luigi Del Puerto. I'm the associate publisher and editor of the Arizona Capital Times. The Arizona Capital Times, of course, covers state government and state politics. And if you don't have a subscription, let me know. We'll get you squared away. A lot of people a lot of our readers describe the Arizona Capital Times as an independent, nonpartisan, non-ideological newspaper. I kind of refer to ourselves as an equal harassment newspaper. And so we try our best to give you the news without bias and with objectivity. And we try our best to get to the truth as much as it is possible to get to the truth. This morning, we are going to be talking about the mechanics, the logistics of conducting the 2020 elections. But first, I want to thank our sponsor, the Arizona Citizens Clean Elections Commission, for engaging with us in this way. The commission administers the Citizens Clean Elections Act, which voters passed in 1998. The act seeks to restore citizen participation and confidence in the political system, improve the integrity of the Arizona state government, and promote freedom of speech under the U.S. and Arizona constitutions. The commission is the state's voter education program. It also provides an optional public financing program to qualified statewide and legislative candidates. And of course, it enforces the Clean Elections Act. So again, thank you, Clean Elections Commission, for sponsoring this morning's discussion. We have a great panel this morning. Joining us is Patty Hansen, who is the recorder of Coconino County, a fierce advocate for voting rights. Recorder Hansen continually fights against voter suppression efforts, both at the state and the national levels. She has worked for Coconino County since 2003 and served as county recorder since 2012. She is the past president of the Arizona County Recorder Association and served on the Arizona Association of County Officials Board of Directors. A leader nationally, she has also served on committees for the Election Center and the Federal Election Assistance Administration. Patty, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Look forward to it.
Also joining us is Scott Jarrett, who is the Director of Election Day and Emergency Voting of Maricopa County, a position he has served since, I believe, almost 1 year today, or this time around, right, Scott?
That's correct. Officially, July 1st, I started with the Maricopa County Elections Department. So tomorrow will be my anniversary.
Happy anniversary in advance. Director Jarrett has more than 13 years of operational audit experience across county government. Previously, he served as audit manager, also at Maricopa County Internal Audit, and a senior auditor at Maricopa County Community College District. Director Jarrett also served in the U.S. Coast Guard. Scott, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And finally, we have Gina Roberts, who is the Voter Education Director of the Citizens Clean Elections Commission. Gina had cut her teeth on public service in 2007 when she joined the city of Peoria as city clerk specialist, where, among other tasks, she administered elections. She then went on to join the Secretary of State's office in 2011, serving under Secretary of State Ken Bennett as the election office manager. She joined Clean Elections in 2014, where she manages the commission's public and voter education duties and activities, including executing the candidate statement pamphlet, coordinating candidate debates, and of course, providing election information to candidates, voters, and the media. She has been a certified election officer since 2009. Gina, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Luigi. I look forward to this discussion.
So, in 2016, the last presidential election, I think 74% of voters, nearly 2.7 million Arizonans, cast a ballot. And this is a presidential election year, and the expectation is that we're going to have a record turnout. And correct me if I'm wrong if that's the case, but Scott and Patty, do you expect record turnouts in your jurisdictions? Let me start with Patty.
Yes, I'm expecting probably the largest number of people we've ever had vote in Coconino County this November. So everything indicates we're on the way to setting records, and I think it's definitely going to happen.
And the same situation for Scott?
Yes, Luigi, I agree with Patty. So just in this last March presidential preference election, we had historic turnout for Democrats participating, and we're anticipating that same trend to follow through with our August primary and then for the November general election. We could see upwards of 80% of voters turning out for the November general election. So in Maricopa County, that'd be almost 2 million voters.
80% turnout, wow. That's a lot of turnout. That's a lot of voters. So, back four years ago, we saw what happened in Maricopa County, which is the election officials made grave errors, right? That resulted in very long lines. We opened 60 polling locations, and a lot of the independent voters who were not supposed to show up at the polls show up at the presidential preference elections. And so we haven't really encountered those very long lines since. But with the potential for record turnout, I wonder how you're preparing. I don't think you're worrying too much about the primary, but the general certainly. And let me just let me ask Scott. I think the question is, how do you ensure you don't have those very long wait lines in November? And I ask the question because we're amid a pandemic, right? And we're supposed to do all kinds of safety measures, including social distancing. I think this virus is going to be here with us to stay for a little bit, or maybe for a long time. So I wonder how you're going to ensure that we don't have those snake lines for miles on end.
So I want to just look back at our March presidential preference election, and we're experiencing COVID-19 in that March election. So that's our first election where we had to experience and overcome those challenges. And here in Maricopa County and throughout the state, I think we did a fairly good job of being able to meet those challenges. And in Maricopa County, we had to redesign an entire election in 5 days. So for this August primary, we're given 5 months. But we're able to take those lessons learned from March and apply them to August. And then we'll take those lessons learned that we learned in August and apply those for November. But specifically for the lines. So what we do is we forecast turnout, and then we just need to make sure that we have enough voting locations to be able to accommodate that turnout, enough check-in stations within those voting locations. But it's also not just a strategy of in-person voting. It's expanding access. So because of COVID-19, we need to ensure that voters have the ability and the options to choose how they want to participate in this election. So making them aware of how they can request an early ballot, whether that be one time for August, one time for the November, or permanently. Making voters aware that they can vote early. So in Maricopa County, we're expanding for August, and we'll look to see if we can do the same thing for November, but expanding the number of days that we're opening early vote centers. And many of those early vote centers will be open on weekends and in the evenings to allow voters to have that option to vote early if they choose. And also that would help reduce lines on election day. And then providing a vote center model, 100. So that's what we're changing to in Maricopa County from a precinct-based system for this election for the August primary, is to provide a vote center model, moving away from precincts. So that would allow voters to vote at any one of our vote centers, not just their assigned precinct.
So
Can I jump in and add to that, PG? Yeah, I think one of the important things to discuss, since you mentioned 4 years ago, with the long lines, that was during the presidential preference election 4 years ago, in which independent voters could not participate. So we're looking forward to our primary right now, and independent voters can absolutely participate in the August 4th primary. And as Scott described, the infrastructure that will be available for voters, he also touched on the importance that voters understand what's available to them. And I think that's where voter education is a key component here. And having an educated and informed voter about what their voting options are, that's going to really lend to having those reduced lines. And so investing in that voter education and making sure that voters understand, okay, is it my preference to get a mail-in ballot, or do I know which vote center is closest to me that I want to go to, or all of the early voting locations. Having that informed voter is definitely going to contribute to a reduction in wait times.
So Gina, before I go to Patty, you mentioned the options for voters. Can you tell us again what the options are and exactly how you can avail of those options?
Absolutely. So as a voter, you have several options on how you can cast your ballot. The three main ones are if you decide that you want to vote early. So election day actually starts 27 days before the election. So you can get your ballot by mail. And that's what we see is very popular here in Arizona. We see about 80% of our state has actually chosen to get their ballot mailed to them. And it's a process that has been established for over 2 decades in Arizona, and election officials know how to run that portion of the election very smoothly. It's efficient, it's secure, it's verifiable. The other option is if you don't want to get your ballot mailed to you, you can vote in person, but you don't have to wait until election day. So if you decide, maybe election day is not the best bet for you and you're looking for maybe less crowds, you can go to an on-site early voting location. And then of course there's election day as well too. So it's really the voter's choice and what works best for them, especially in light of COVID-19, what makes the most sense for the safety and security of their family. It's the voter's choice. So they definitely have options.
So Patty, let me ask you, because, obviously you're in a rural area and, part urban, right? And then, huge swaths of like rural areas. And so your situation is somewhat different than what we have here in Maricopa County. But, I guess the same question, I don't think you're going to have the same problems insofar as lines, right? Do you anticipate that? And how are you going to resolve, the potential for a record turnout in your jurisdiction?
As Gina mentioned, we're going to try to get the information out to people on what their options are. The locations where we've seen lines has been in Flagstaff and specifically at Northern Arizona University with the students turning out to vote, because they seem to vote only in presidential elections and then they come out of the woodwork. So I think, as Gina said, getting those options out to people. Now, we do have challenges with voting by mail in our rural areas, specifically on the Navajo Nation, because you can't mail an interpreter to with the ballot. So we will be offering expanding opportunities prior to election day, as Gina mentioned, those 27 days where people will be able to come and get the language assistance that they would need or any other type of assistance. And in fact, I'm encouraging people to vote from home. And one thing I should mention that in the past we had seen, and I think this affected Maricopa County when they had the long lines, is it 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 used to be that when people requested an early ballot, they would return and vote that early ballot. But because of the expansion of the permanent early voting list and the advocacy groups getting everybody to sign up onto the list, we had a lot of voters that requested the early ballot and then they show up on election day and they don't vote their early ballot. So that has led to some of the problems in the past, which hopefully can be resolved this election through public education.
So
And
go ahead, Scott.
I could add too. So both Patty and Gina mentioned voter outreach and information and communicating to voters. And we're doing something very similar here in Maricopa County, and we're investing in a very robust campaign to inform voters of their options. And also one challenge is independents have come up, and why they are eligible to participate in this election, they do need, especially if they're on the permanent early voting list, they need to tell us what ballot they want. So they do have to take that extra step. So that's part of our voter outreach, is informing those independents to let them know that they need to tell us which ballot they want so we can mail it to them, as well as if they wanted to vote that in person.
How are you doing this exactly, Scott? So is it through traditional, advertising in the media, or is it through Facebook, social media, a combination of all those?
Yeah, it'll be all platforms. So you'll see television commercials from Maricopa County. You'll see over radio. We have some digital billboards. And then definitely social media these days. That's where it seems to be, especially the younger voters, but I think all voters are on social media now, and making sure that we're hitting those platforms as well.
So if I'm getting this one right, and maybe Gina can weigh on this one, if you're an independent voter, and the primary election's coming up August 4th, and then you have 27 days prior to vote in person at any of the open polling locations, right? And then of course you can mail in your ballot. But if you're going to go for mailing in your ballot, you do have to let the county election departments and recorders know which ballot you're taking.
Right. That's correct. So if you're an independent voter, which we in Arizona, we have quite a few, we have over 1 million independent voters here, and you want to vote in the Arizona primary, you do have to take that extra step, especially if you're on the permanent early voting list, because otherwise, as an independent, you get the choice. So your choices are, do you want to vote the Democratic ballot or do you want to vote the Republican ballot? The Libertarian Party is a statewide recognized party, but they have a closed primary. And then in some cases, there may be a local nonpartisan ballot available. So you need to tell your county recorder which ballot you want mailed to you, otherwise they don't know. And so a lot of times we hear from voters, well, isn't there just one ballot that has all of the candidates on there from across the parties? That's what you see in the general election. So in the primary, it's specific to the parties. So as an independent voter, you get to choose which ballot do you want. Do you want the Democratic ballot, the Republican ballot, or if possible, a local nonpartisan ballot? But yes, you do have to take that extra step if you're going to be voting by mail. If you go in person, you just tell your poll worker.
So how do you exactly do that? Where do you go to make sure that you change your you request a Democratic or a Republican ballot?
You can go to, so we've got Maricopa County here, you can go to their website to designate that. You can call them. So you can call Patty's office, you can call Maricopa County office. You basically just reach out to them and let them know this is the ballot that I want, or to the 90-day notice. Patty, maybe you want to address that a little bit more. I believe they can return that 90-day notice to make their selection as well.
Yes, that's what, for everybody on the permanent early voting list, we mailed a notice to them 90 days prior to the election. And the ones that went to those independent voters told them that they will need to let the election office know what ballot they want to receive. And it includes a postage paid return request form and gives them the options Gina mentioned, such as they can call us or go on our website.
And so, there is a certain pattern of behavior that people have embraced, in their voting history, right? A lot of people really want to, some people want to go out and be at the polling centers so they can kind of physically participate in this democratic process, in our form of representative democracy, if you will. And I used to do this one. I'm on the Pebble. I have my Pebble with me. I fill it out, and I don't mail it because I want to go and see what the polling centers look like. And I do that partly because I'm a reporter, and so I wanted to provide color in whatever story I'm working on. But I also realize that I'm part of the problem, because if I drop off that early ballot on election day, that creates a tabulating problem, right? So instead of helping in the process, I was part of the problem, and I'm modifying that behavior. So I guess one thing that we can tell folks is that if you're voting by mail, you mail them in. That's the easiest way you can do it, and that's very convenient for you, but it also helps in the process. Correct, Gina?
Yes, I think there's a couple of components to that. First, I would say if you're voting, you're not part of the problem. We want your ballot, whether you're dropping it off at 6:59 p.m. on election day or earlier. But where this impacts is tabulation, but also results. So we know, especially with the presidential election year, all eyes are going to be on Arizona. People want to get the results quickly. But of course, our election officials make sure that things are done in accordance with law and it's accurate. And so part of that includes the time that it takes to process those early ballots. And so there are post-election day procedures such as audits, things that are done by the counties to ensure the integrity of the elections. But if you are a voter and you have an early ballot, the recommendation is that you mail it back about a week before the election, just to make sure that it can make its way through the post office, because all ballots need to be received by 7 p.m. on election day. But if you're still hanging on to it, you can drop it off at any voting location in your county. And one thing too that we've seen this year, and I would say part of this is in response to COVID-19, is a lot of counties have purchased ballot drop boxes. These are secure bins that the counties have placed within their jurisdiction, within the counties, that voters can actually drop off their ballot in that bin as well too. And so when we talk a lot about contact-free service right now, that's an option as well that voters can utilize.
So Scott, let me ask you about the 100 polling locations, right? The voting centers that you've transitioned into. What's the difference between a traditional polling precinct and a voting center?
So the difference is with a precinct-based voting location, we used to have many of those throughout the county, much more than the 100 vote centers, but that would be unique to that individual precinct. So a voter would be assigned to go to that location, and then they couldn't go to another precinct. So they're on a roster or a list that they could vote at that precinct, where a vote center is a vote anywhere location. So that means that any voter could go to any vote center throughout the county. So that's the primary difference.
We're not going to have polling precincts anymore, right? So if you're a voter, you're not assigned a polling precinct. You just have to find the closest voting center, either closest to your home or closest to your work, correct?
So, and that's the model we're implementing now for the August primary election, and then we'll relook at that process after August to see if that would work for now the November general election.
So, and there's 100 of them for the August, for the primary elections. Are you increasing that for November, or are you kind of playing it by ear and seeing what kind of results you're going to get?
So first we'll take a look at how August works for us, and then we'll make decisions about November after August, but we would have to increase the number regardless. If we still use the vote center model in November, we'd need much more than 100.
It sounds very convenient to me because, I can tell you there had been occasions when I'd go to I'd look up my polling precinct, I'd go there, the guy says, "Nah, you're not on here." And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's the information that got spat out when I looked it up on the county or the Secretary of State's website. But a voting center means you don't have to go through the process. anybody that walks in, you're taken in.
And that's one of, with COVID-19 and the challenges that it presented, a lot of our traditional voting locations were not available to us. And they weren't large enough for us to implement physical distancing, one of the safety protocols that we're implementing, at least here in Maricopa County. So we needed to identify these large locations, but in doing that, we didn't have 500 plus locations available to us. So we still wanted to make it as convenient as possible for voters. So that's why we are rolling out the vote center model.
So I want to pause here for a second. I can see our viewers and listeners starting to ask questions already. Do send in your questions. We'll spend some time trying to get through, as many as we can. I do want to ask Patty, because Patty, just before we started broadcasting, you have a very unique situation in which you have to go down to Havasupai, right? Got to hike down to in the Grand Canyon to get to about 130 voters or so. Tell us about what the situation is, given the fact that COVID-19 is a real problem, and from what I'm hearing, it's a really big challenge to try and make sure that our voters, the voters down in the Grand Canyon, are in fact able to vote.
You're correct. Right now, there are 0 cases of COVID in Supai Village for the Havasupai tribe. So they have locked down their village. They do not want anybody from the outside coming in, and nobody in the village is coming out. So that makes it difficult for us on how to get supplies, how to conduct the election there. And so we're working with the tribal council to try to come up with some solutions. Also, because they depend on tourism, usually we have the helicopter flying down there 2 or 3 times a week. Now, because of COVID, it's only going down once a week on Fridays. And even the mail goes down on mule, and it's mules, and it's not every day. So we're working to have our 2 election workers from the village, trying to figure out a way to get them the supplies and the ballots, and essentially having them become a special election board, similar to what we use for people in the hospital or incarcerated in the jails, to assist the voters. And so we can allow them to vote just like everybody else.
What is that? What is an election board?
The election board is the poll workers, 2 people of opposite political party that can go and assist a voter to vote. So for most of our special election boards go to people who are homebound and unable to get to an early voting site or to their polling place, and usually because of an illness or a disability, and they're allowed to vote ahead of time, so nothing prevents them from voting.
So the Havasupai tribe is under lockdown. They have 0 cases over there. It makes sense for them to keep everybody out, because once you bring in the virus to someplace, the chances that it will spread pretty quickly, as we have seen, is very real, and so it makes sense for them to be under a lockdown. And you mentioned the supplies are actually going to get to the village via a helicopter, and it only flies in on a Friday. So now you're having to navigate and maybe trying to coordinate and negotiate. Maybe they can go into the village when exactly, on Tuesday morning or Monday before? Or?
Well, to get the voted ballots out, we're working with the village to see if maybe on election day, in the early evening where it's still light enough that the helicopter can fly, we'll bring the voted ballots out, so we can meet the helicopter and have those ballots come in, and they can be counted with the rest of the ballots.
But then you're not going to send in poll workers, right? So all that work is going to be done, and you're coordinating with the tribe insofar as how to actually go through and conduct elections down there.
That's correct. We have poll workers that work for us, prior to the time of COVID, And those are the ones that we're working with right now. Thank goodness for technology, because we can do this type of thing, a Zoom meeting or that, to do the training and communicate. So,
And when things actually, I'm really hoping, everybody's hoping we can get COVID-19 managed, and get it under control, stabilize it, and beat this virus, right? Everybody's hoping for that. Let's say, for example, that we get everything under control. How do I actually volunteer so I can go with your poll worker and go down to have a supply and actually, and supply village and in theory, I'll be there to be a poll worker, right? But really, I just want to do some sightseeing. How do I actually do that?
well, that is the one polling place that we don't have a problem getting people to volunteer to be a poll worker for us. We usually have a county employee that hikes down, and then out of the village and works with our election board members down there. And it seems like I get so many people who are willing to volunteer to do that.
Be sure that they're actually have their hiking shoes.
That's
Can I
correct.
do
They
a,
need to be in shape.
can I do a quick plug for the other counties too, though?
Yeah, sure.
If you want to serve as a poll worker, the counties need you. It is a paid position, and the Secretary of State's office just launched a new webpage on their website where you can sign up for serving as a poll worker, and it'll go to the county, or you can contact your county directly. But I think right now, if you're healthy and you're able to serve and participate in democracy, serving as a poll worker is a great way to do that.
In fact, that's a great segue, Gina. You mentioned poll workers, right? So I think to me, the overarching challenge is how to make sure that the voters are safe from COVID-19, or will you minimize as much as possible the risk of getting this virus, but also the poll workers. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, based anecdotally and what I've seen every time I go to a poll, you do have an older population serving as poll workers. And how are you going to protect them? Let me start with Scott.
So first off, I just want to say I'm incredibly grateful to all of our poll workers and our central board workers for volunteering, and well, they do get paid, but doing the incredible work that they do to help serve democracy. Without them, we could not provide in-person voting options. So as election officials, see Patty nodding, then we take that burden on our shoulders to be able to provide as safe as possible in-person voting options, making our polling locations as safe as possible. So in Maricopa County, that means several things. First was we needed to identify those very large locations that we could implement physical distancing throughout. So that means 6 feet between every check-in station, 6 feet between every voting booth, where there's queuing in the location where you're waiting for your ballot to be printed or where you're waiting to put your ballot in the tabulation, 6 feet there as well. But then we also collaborated with the Maricopa County Department of Public Health to establish protocols for how we would keep our poll workers safe. And that includes that we're providing them with protective gear. So every poll worker will be mandated to wear a mask. We're providing them a face shield that they'll wear throughout the process. So the entire time they're in the location, except for when they're eating, they'll be wearing that protective gear. We have gloves. We're getting single-use pens for the voters, and then we're also going to be able to offer every voter
did you say
mask.
Did you say single-use pens?
Yeah, so every pen, we have enough pens that we can get through the majority of the day voting with those pens. They'll drop them in the canisters, and then we're going to have our poll workers sanitizing them at the end of the day, and then putting them in the voting booths for the voters.
In Maricopa County, you're talking about 2 million pens, right?
Yes, well, for right now, we have the quantities we need for the August primary,
okay.
And then we'll work for November general election after we get through August. We're still ordering those right now to be prepared for November.
It might be better off if people just actually bring their own pens. That might be something that they could just do. If they can help that way, it's their pen. They're not sharing it with anybody.
And talking about bringing your own, so we are encouraging voters to bring their own mask as well. Okay. So they can bring their mask to the voting location, but if they don't have one, we'll have a mask there available to offer to the voter as well. We'll be issuing gloves that they can use through the check-in process as well as through the voting process. And then we have cleaning supplies so that with those supplies, we can wipe down those high-touch surfaces. That includes door handles, light switches, the voting equipment itself, so the check-in stations, the voting booths, all of those types of things.
And what about in Patty's case? What sorts of safety measures are you've begun to adopt? You're going to adopt for the primary and then the general elections?
Almost everything that Scott has mentioned we're doing. One thing we are also offering is we're going to require voters to wear a mask. And if they don't have a mask with them, we're going to offer them, they will be voting in a different manner. We will be doing curbside voting. So they'll be voting from their cars so they don't come into the facility with the rest of the poll workers and voters. So that's something we've used curbside voting in the past for people that had disabilities and could not get into the polling place. But this time we're expanding it and having it ready for anybody who just does not want to wear a mask. No voter will be turned away and not allowed to vote, but they will be asked to vote in their car instead of coming into the building.
So I'm trying to envision that one. So let's say there's let's say I'm a voter and I live in Flagstaff. I'm a voter there. I'm in my car. Either I don't want to wear a mask, so I go to the polling precinct, right? So what is the first thing I see? Somebody that kind of waved me in with a ballot, and then how does that actually work?
Well, we will have greeters outside at our election marshals. One of the members of the election board is a person designated as the marshal, and they will be, if the person needs to vote from their car, they will come in and two members of the election board will come out with the paperwork, the ballot, a secrecy sleeve, and instruct the voter. Their voted ballot will go into a secrecy sleeve, and then the two poll workers bring it back in and put it in the ballot box.
So you'll have basically an extra number of poll workers that would just deal with people who don't want to wear a mask.
That's correct.
And then
I'm hoping it's very few. From what I've seen, most people are very willing to wear a mask, and we will have them available similar as to Scott for people who don't bring them with them.
So we do have the cities that have imposed the requirement for people to wear a mask, right? So in theory, if those requirements are still in place by August or by November, then in theory, people are wearing a mask. So there is one question I wanted to ask Scott. You are now in Maricopa County, you will not be requiring people to wear a mask.
That's correct. We're not requiring voters to wear a mask in our polling locations. We are strongly encouraging and recommending that they do, as well as offering them if they don't have one themselves.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
And we do have curbside voting, but our curbside voting is really designed for a voter with a disability that cannot vote about or make it inside the polling location. And then we do put signage outside of our voting locations. So we have the disabled parking sign, and then it has the phone number for voters to call if they need to request curbside voting.
So can I add on to one of Scott's comments, the talk about bring your own mask, bring your own pen, but also bring your sample ballot with you. I mean, if we're talking about the safety and security of the poll workers and the voters, one thing the voter can do is limit your exposure, the amount of time that you're actually in the polling place. And that means coming prepared with knowing how you're going to vote. How are you going to fill out that ballot? So if you're not on the permanent early voting list, you're going to get a sample ballot mailed to you 11 days before the election. So take the time, make your plan on how you're voting, do your research. That way, when you do go into the polls, you can hopefully get in and out, help reduce the wait times, and again, limit your exposure in the amount of time that you're inside that actual polling place, I think is a good thing for voters to think about.
So I wanted to, I'm sorry, Patty, did you have something else to add to it?
I just wanted to add that one thing we're implementing in Coconino County is the 2 Saturdays prior to the election, we're having drive-through early voting. And so we're encouraging people that are concerned about going into a building that they will be able to drive through and vote early in their cars. And so we're hoping that people will also take advantage of that. One of the problems that I hear why people don't like early voting is they think they have to vote way in advance of the election. And a lot of people don't make up their minds until closer to election day. So having those early voting options available that week before and then also that weekend before the election is very important. And I know that Scott, that you and Maricopa County have really expanded your early voting centers. I don't know if you want to mention how many you're going to have and how that's going to work.
Yeah, Scott, go ahead and tell us about it.
Thank you, Patty, for the plug. So yeah, we are opening up several of those locations. So we're opening them in different phases. So our first phase is right at 27 days. So even if you want to vote early, and Gina had mentioned that 27-day time frame to request an early ballot by mail, you can also vote in person early at one of our vote centers. And we're going to have about 5 of those open throughout the valley for about a 2-week period. And then we're going to open up our next phase, the second phase, where we're going to have close to 60 vote centers open for 2 straight weeks of voting. And that's going to be every single day. There are a few locations that are churches that are closed on Sundays, and we can't open those, but the vast majority of them will be open for 2 straight weeks. And then we're going to open on a third phase. We're opening an additional 20 approximately to get us through that last week of voting. And then we will be really close to 100 locations come election day.
How many people are you expecting to actually vote in person? Are you 350,000 people, 450,000 people? How many do you expect at the, to actually physically show up?
Forecasting voter turnout is a difficult challenge because even though you think that elections occur frequently, they don't. Every 2 years, there can be significant changes, and turnout is sometimes just the product of who's on the ballot or what is on the ballot and how much interest there is in a particular election. So we are anticipating record turnout for this August primary. And if COVID-19 didn't exist for August, we would expect there'd be somewhere right around 100,000 in-person voters for election day, right around 700,000 total voters. And then for November, we would expect anywhere from 350,000 to 400,000 in-person voters in Maricopa County, and upwards of 2 million voters total for the election.
Is that pre-COVID, the estimate pre-COVID?
That's correct, estimate pre-COVID. And then even for this upcoming August election, but there's other challenges or differences that aren't COVID related, right? The elections moved up to the first week in August. So how does that impact, so in Maricopa County, right, we have snowbirds. So are they out of state? And so they're not going to want to vote in person now. They'll request that absentee ballot. I think, Patty, they have a large college voting population, NAU. Well, those students may not be in Flagstaff. So there's those other unique factors related to COVID-19. But then because of COVID-19, we are really putting a lot of money into informing voters of their options of how to participate in this election. So we're actually anticipating that that's just going to drive turnout up all across the board in all modes, not just in person, but also driving up turnout for people to request a ballot by mail and to actually return that ballot.
There is an expectation by the people that, soon after the polls close, a few hours after the polls close, that we're actually going to see results, right? But I think it's, we have to point out that in Arizona, where early voting and mail-in voting is the norm, right? It is the norm. 80% of voters vote by mail. It is the norm. You know, uh, there's always going to be a little bit of a delay in the tabulating because of the way we set up our system, right? And so I think, um, Gina, you want to talk about just managing that expectation from the people. If there is going to be a record turnout, if you're going to see a lot of people show up on election day with their early ballots, there's going to be some delay in tabulating.
Sure. Yeah, I think what's important to remember is that the majority of voters are voting by mail. And so on election night, 8 p.m., when those results start to come through, the first round of results that you're seeing are actually the early ballots that have been tabulated so far. So the counties, actually, and Scott, you can jump in on this too, but I know the legislature authorized the counties even more time now to start tabulating those early ballots once they complete their logic and accuracy testing of their equipment. So I think maybe it's around 14 days that they can start doing that tabulation, which is very helpful. But the thing to remember too is at 8 p.m., as you're seeing those results come in throughout the night too, and you're seeing what we often hear from voters and maybe some confusion about how the process works is, maybe they look at precincts reporting for the night and you say, oh, 100% of precincts have reported. We have to remember those are just the voters that voted at the polls at those precincts on election day, which is not the majority of the ballots that have been cast. The majority is those early ballots that have been submitted, and it takes time to process those. Every single ballot has to be reviewed. It has to go through signature verification to make sure that the voter who actually was sent that ballot was the voter that voted it and returned it. And then, of course, there's the post-election day activities too, such as audits and things like that. So with the majority of ballots coming in being early ballots and seeing a higher turnout, it does take time. And I think managing those expectations as a voter in comparison to what you may see from the media, we know the media wants to call the elections. And I know election officials sometimes get frustrated by that because the media they're making projections. The tabulation has not finished, the counting has not finished, and every ballot that is cast is counted, is reviewed. And so I just think that maybe if voters have a better understanding of how that process works and the checks and balances that are in place that can manage their expectations from results. But yes, it does take time for us to fully get through all of that and to actually canvass and certify those official election results.
Let me go to some of the, I'm sorry, Patty, go ahead, ma'am.
If I could just add, the reason I think it's become such a issue here in Arizona in the past few years is our elections are so close now. When people win by large margins, nobody's caring about how long it took us to finish the election because it's not new to us. As Gina has mentioned, we have a lot to do after the election to make sure we do all of our auditing and everything, processing provisional ballots, processing early ballots. But with these close elections we've been having, especially statewide in recent years, that focus on why aren't you done? Why aren't you done is so much stronger than it ever was before.
And I do want to mention that you're talking about the focus on getting those tabulations done as quickly as possible because there's a close race. Arizona, if people are strategists and pollsters and everybody's to be believed, is going to play potentially a key role in deciding the presidential election. And so it's very plausible that you'll have this national spotlight on Arizona. And given the sort of the nuances that we have with our the way we conduct our elections and early voting and early ballots, you might actually be, the whole country might be looking at Arizona to kind of decide the results of the presidential race. And I can't kind of imagine the kind of pressure it would put on election officials. But let me go to, I'm sorry, go Scott.
Luigi, I just want to mention too, and integrity and security are paramount. And the election world, and making sure that we take those mail ballots and put them through every step of the process to ensure that they are valid, that we verified the identity of the voter, that signature matches our records before we tabulate. But there are things that we're doing in the Help America Vote Act that's provided funding for counties across the state to improve their tabulation equipment. And the Board of Supervisors here in Maricopa County purchased brand new tabulation equipment just in June 2019. We did put it through a pilot test in our November jurisdictional elections. We used it for the March presidential preference election. And that improved tabulation equipment was designed to really help improve how quickly we could get those results, especially in our central count environment. So not only I want to thank the state legislature. I know probably some of you are on the call this morning or watching, but thank you for allowing us to start tabulating 14 days early. And then also it was the first bill out of session this last year where they allowed us to use something called electronic adjudication. So that actually, when a voter's intent is not clear, and that could be for a variety of reasons. That's if a ballot has a smudge mark on it. I know voters sometimes when they're filling it out at home and their hand runs across, they could create a smudge. And then when that runs through our tabulation equipment, the tabulator can't tell, well, how did this voter vote? Or they've put a pen rest, or they've rested their pen and it's created another mark on the ballot. And we need to then have a bipartisan board made up of Republicans, Democrats, look at that ballot and determine how it should be counted. Well, in Maricopa County, the old process before this new tabulation equipment was to manually duplicate that entire ballot, even if it was only one single contest. And with this new electronic adjudication, it's still performed by a bipartisan board, a Republican, a Democrat sitting there performing this with the oversight of an inspector, but it's done electronically, and it just significantly increases. It used to take about 12 minutes per ballot in Maricopa County. Now we're down to about a minute per ballot to perform that same process.
Wow. So let me get to some of the viewers' questions. I think this one's for Scott. Will all polling places be voting centers rather than needing to be in your precinct? I think we answered this one already, I think. Yeah, I think we did. But...
That's correct. For the August primary, all of the voting locations will be a vote center, and we will be posting those on locations.maricopa.vote or BeBallotReady.vote. And so voters can go find where their closest location is. And we're also adding some new functionality to our locations website. And it's going to allow some sortable features and find out how close they are, what those hours of operation are, and also wait times. So we'll be based on our check-in stations, we can determine how long it takes voters to check in, how long it takes voters to vote a ballot, and then we can calculate what that wait time potentially would be. And then voters can make an informed decision about where they want to vote, because they don't have to go to that one assigned precinct. There are 100 options for them. If they are working downtown or they're working across town from where they live, they can go to locations.maricopa.vote, another plug for that website, and look to see, oh, what is the wait time near me? Maybe I'll take advantage of voting on this side of town because they have that option now.
This one, thank you, Scott. This one's for Patty. How do we educate voters or work against myths and misinformation regarding the safety of mailing in the ballot?
That is a hard issue. I think the best way we do it is to explain all of the checks and balances that are in place. Scott mentioned a few of them, but every step along the way for early ballots, there is auditing done to make sure that we're accounting for every ballot that comes in. That signature verification is very important. And in fact, all of the recorders and their staff that does the signature verification recently went through a signature verification class conducted by a forensic signature expert. So we're trained on things to look for. And it's a slow process. That's one of the reasons why those early ballots turned in On election day, we don't have done the next day because we have all of those steps and balances put in place to ensure that there is no fraud. We know who we mail early ballots to. We know there's a code on the envelope when it's coming back. You can track it. In fact, in the urban areas, you can, I think Maricopa has implemented that you can actually track your ballot through the postal system. So it's a very secure method of voting.
This one's for Gina. So since the and I'm not sure about the date, but the question is, since the Pebble ballots will be mailed July 8th, is it now too late for independent voters on Pebble to designate which ballot they want? I think the answer is no, but Gina.
No, it is absolutely not too late.
Yeah.
Voters have until 5 p.m. on July 24th to make their request for their ballot to be mailed to them. So if you're an independent voter, you have all the way until July 24th to contact your county, but that goes for any voter. So even if you're not on, and I say Pebble people, even if you're not on Pebble and you want to do that one-time request, you can still do that. Just contact your county by July 24th. And I can't help myself, but if I could add on a little bit more to Patty's response about the security of mail-in ballots, I think that is a very important discussion right now about, maybe some of the myths that are surrounding it. And I think Scott and Patty had really good points about it. But one thing I want to stress is that identity of a voter, the identification of a voter, is absolutely verified before that ballot is tabulated, before that ballot is counted, for every single voter, regardless of how they cast their ballot. So whether it's an early ballot or they're voting in person at the polls, their identification is confirmed. As Patty said, the counties know who they're mailing those ballots to. The voter has to actually make it a request. There's mailings that are done to confirm that they're still at the location on record with their voter registration. Federal law requires that voters must prove their identity before they vote by ballot for the first time. And again, there's transparency in the process. In Maricopa County, I am signed up for their text alerts. It's fantastic. You get a text message or an email notification through every step of your ballot being processed, so you know that it's coming. And then when you get your ballot, you have options for you to decide what you feel most comfortable with and how to return it, whether that's a drop box or mailing it back or dropping it off in person. And it's really cool, I think, now, because Maricopa County has said that all early ballots will come with a sticker, which I think is exciting. But I want to stress.
Oh, you mean the vote sticker?
Yeah, the I voted, that coveted social currency there, the I voted sticker. But I really want to stress all of the steps that are in place to ensure the integrity of voting by mail.
So I think the deadline for requesting a Pebble for the primary ballot is July 24th. Is that correct?
Yes, July 24th at 5 p.m.
Okay.
Yeah, 11 days before the election.
Okay. All right. So here's the question. If somebody is asking if that person has a mail-in ballot, that person shows up on election day, that person doesn't have to go in line. He just waves his or her ballot, and then that person that goes right to just drops his or her ballot. Correct? No need for line to fall in line. Correct?
That's correct. And in Maricopa County, and I know Patty talked about that they have people helping greet people as the marshal performs this function a lot. We'll have that option at our locations, as well as on election day itself. We're putting out our drop boxes. We're going to put up pop-up tents outside of the location. We're going to put our drop boxes outside of the polling location, so that those voters don't even have to enter. They can go right to that drop box that's outside. It'll be manned by 2 staff members, poll workers, and then those voters can drop off their ballot there. In addition to, we'll have, as Gina said, we'll have some drop boxes at most of the city clerk's offices. So that's one thing for Maricopa County. Normally, we've had a voting location in every single city clerk's office. However, many of them were not large enough for us to implement our physical distancing protocols. So now we've offered, as long as they're going to be open, they'll have a drop box at those locations. And then we've found another alternative location that is larger within that jurisdiction to provide the voting center.
There was one question that popped
Um,
up there. I think it's,
can I
sorry.
just add
Yeah, go ahead,
one
Patty,
thing I
ma'am.
think is
Yeah,
important? If you show up at the polling place with your ballot, you do have to have your early ballot affidavit envelope and have the ballot in that envelope with your
that's right.
signature on it.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
you
when you
can't just
sign.
show
Yep.
up with a ballot
Yep.
with no envelope.
Right. So I think there's a question that popped out. I think it's important to answer it. And can an independent vote for um, any for other than federal offices in the primary? Which offices can an independent voter in Arizona vote for?
So
Gina,
they
you.
can
I'm sorry,
choose.
Scott. Yeah.
They can choose the Democratic Party ballot and the Republican Party ballot, as well as just that local jurisdiction if they choose that ballot as well. So they aren't just required to vote the federal only ballot. And they can make that designation online where we mail their ballot to them, or they can make that designation in the polling location during early voting or on election day.
Here's a question. I think the
If I
answer.
could
Yeah, I'm sorry.
just
Go ahead, Patty.
add on that, in Arizona, we do have federal only voters, and those are voters that have not provided proof of citizenship. They have just affirmed on their registration form they're U.S. citizens. So any of those voters, they're only qualified to vote for federal offices. It's very few in Coconino County. I think we have about 300 right now.
So, and I think the answer to this one is yes. Can you drop off your early ballot at any polling place in your county, or does it have to be in your precinct's polling place? I think Patty, if there's a voter, he or she goes to a different precinct assigned to him or to her, can that person drop off his or her ballot at that sort of a, I guess you can say, incorrect precinct?
No, early ballots can be dropped off at any polling place
Okay.
in the county.
Okay.
Or the drop boxes that we'll
Yeah.
have throughout the county too.
We're at 9 o'clock. There are a few other questions I want to go to. Do you have like maybe 3 or 4 more minutes? Is that okay? All right. Just real quick. Does Pima County have voting centers? Do you know, Gina, if they do have?
Pima County is utilizing polling places.
Okay.
So they will be precinct assigned polling places. However, I do want to clarify early voting locations are not precinct specific. So you can go to any of your early voting locations. And again, you can also choose to get a ballot by mail if that's your preferred method.
So here's a question on national TV. They keep saying that counting wouldn't be finished until well after the election if the ballots are mailed. In Yavapai County, the ballots have to be received by the close of the polls on election day. Is that true of all counties in the state? If so, the problem doesn't exist here. And I guess here means Yavapai County, but you do have to get in all of your ballots before 7 p.m.
That's correct.
Of election day. Okay. All right. I think we answered this question. Will Maricopa County be requiring face masks? No. The answer is no, Scott, right?
That's correct. We're not requiring face masks for our voters. Our poll workers are required to wear face masks.
Can you repeat all the dates related to voting? Gina, you want to take a crack at this one? So deadlines?
Sure. So we do have an upcoming deadline, which is very important. That's the voter registration deadline, which is Monday, July 6th. The easiest way to get registered is just to go to servicearizona.com. If you have an Arizona driver's license or an Arizona ID card, you can utilize that method. Or of course, you can print out your a voter registration form. And or if that's not possible, you can contact Clean Elections. We're happy to mail you a form too. And then early voting begins on Wednesday, July 8th. And so that's when ballots will actually start to go to the post office and be mailed to voters. And that's when those early voting sites open up as well too. One of the dates we already covered, the last day to request a ballot by mail, that's going to be Friday, July 24th at 5 p.m. And then the recommended date for mailing your ballot back. So if you want to mail your ballot back instead of dropping it off in person, we do recommend you do that by Wednesday, July 29th. And that's just to help ensure that your ballot is received by the county by 7 p.m. on election day. And that's a date that we use across the state. Some, I think, counties actually, maybe in Yavapai County, their mail actually comes to Phoenix and then goes back up. So again, about a week before the election is when you want to mail it back, and that is postage prepaid too. And the last day to vote early in person is Friday, July 31st. So you can go vote in person by 5 p.m. on that Friday before the election. And then after that, there is emergency early voting as well. And then of course, election day, polls are open from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m.
So, Scott, there were a couple of questions. I think directed to you. Why isn't Maricopa County requiring mask? And if that's the case, wouldn't it help? I guess the question is, wouldn't it help? Really minimize the spread of this virus if there's a requirement for voters in the county to wear a mask.
So we cannot deny a voter's right to cast a ballot. So that is why we're not requiring voters to wear a mask. We strongly encourage every voter to either bring their mask, or we're offering every voter a mask in our polling location. But then to keep our poll workers safe, that's why we're mandating the mask and as well as the face shields. So that's how we're creating our polling locations to keep them as safe as possible.
Independent voters can select ballot on the day of the election at the vote center, right? So an independent voter walks in, and then he or she is asked, which ballot do you want to get, right?
That's correct.
And then, and I think, I think we're pretty much out of time. So I do want to thank. There was one question there about if we're going to encourage people to bring their own pens, should it be color coded? It was a joke. Which I found pretty funny. Scott, Gina, and Patty, thank you again for spending your morning with us. I learned a lot. To the Citizens Clean Elections Commission, thank you for sponsoring this event. And to everybody, thank you for your questions, and please enjoy the rest of your day. And bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.